Capernaum, ruins at Capernaum.
This is the evangelical triangle. Okay, Magdala, Mount of Beatitudes, but say, I mean, all those sites are within this range, and you can see that it's not very long, just a stretch of land, probably no more than 6 or 7 miles. And after we're done here, we'll continue with our way all the way over to our next stop, which is in the Jordan Valley, by way of the other side of the lake. We haven't been there yet, but we will explore that area as well. That area, that part of the lake at the time of Jesus, was not Jewish. It was called Opposite Galilee. Okay, this probably rings a bell because one of Jesus' most famous of miracles that took place there was to do with the demoniac, casting out a legion of demons, and when they had a demon-possessed man, it happened right there. In fact, it says it was in the land of the Gadarenes or Gergesenes, in a place, a region, which was opposite Galilee. So Galilee in the 1st century AD is here. It's not here. It's right here. And more specifically, if you think about the Jewish population of Galilee, it's actually here, along the northern shores, not around this area, which was predominantly pagan. Okay? So, let's just walk a little ways this way.
So in actuality, we were back
First of all, I want you to look at the red roof.
So this building, this.
You can see over here an illustration that suggests that building.
This is a synagogue.
Number of things. You can see here outside the synagogue at lower level. This is the rest of the town. Today you'll get to see an example of what a typical structure, a house, a home, would have looked like back then. And what is the first thing that catches the eye? Small rooms. Small rooms, yes,
This whole
absolutely.
thing was one house.
The whole thing was one house, yes. How about the color?
Brown.
The volcanic rock. This is the local bedrock, okay? What can you tell me about these rocks, however? Turn around, what's that? These are different rocks altogether. That's limestone, okay? And it was more expensive at the time, which would suggest that this white building was added on to ancient Capernaum. This is actually from a slightly later period. Whenever you see the dark stone, you'll know that it's from the time of Jesus. The white stone is always from the later period, the 4th century AD, when they rebuilt that synagogue, okay? So now, let's turn back at the structure down here. Archaeologists will call this type of a structure an insula, which simply means an island, because just like an island that is separated on every side by the sea, in this case, it is separated by a series of roads. And you can see the street on this side, you see another street over there, and another one over there, another one, without a doubt, underneath that palm tree, cypress tree, sorry. So this would be what we would probably consider an apartment building. Now, back then, people were far more family-oriented than they are today, even in Jewish society today, okay? You can still see that, for the most part, in Arab society. If you were to go to an Arab village, It's not unlikely to find an entire street where they're all second cousins, third cousins, you know, they all live with a mother-in-law and everything else. And that's exactly the same kind of an idea and impression that we get when we read through the Gospels. So let's take this structure as an example. Again, you see all those different rooms over here. This is not the home of one nuclear family, but several. They're most likely related to each other. The central room right there with these cabinets, these were cabinets for storage. This is where the women would usually cook and you know, the kind of communal thing. But then each and every nuclear family would then possess one of the smaller sections in that little compound. And speaking of which, this would be a good example. You see the outer door leading into a smaller courtyard. You can even see the stairs that led up to a second floor, which is no more. You can even see fragments of pillars that held the second floor. And then from that courtyard, there are 3 bedrooms. 1, 2, 3. This is a typical home here in Capernaum 2,000 years ago. Remember, we're talking about blue-collar community, fishermen, farmers. Most of these people are very simple. This is now the creme de la creme of Jerusalem for sure. And this is where Jesus preached and taught. As far as we know, he could have even been in any of these rooms. Remember, we're talking about a year and a half total that he spends his time here among these people. Now, several things seeing this that come to mind. First of all, the story about the person, you remember, who was on a stretcher. It says that they came to the house and it was so crowded that there was no longer room, not even near the outer door. So Jesus was in the house. Just try to imagine Jesus in one of these rooms. The house is packed with people, and they cannot bring that crippled man on the stretcher through the outer door. So what do they do instead? They make an opening through the roof. Okay, they remove some of the tiles, the shingles, pretty much like today, these German rooftops, right? And then they bring the person down on the stretcher through there. It makes perfect sense. Another example. We talked about the Sermon on the Mountain. One of the things that Jesus addresses in the Sermon on the Mountain is the subject of prayer. And he says to his followers, when you pray, don't be like those hypocrites who love to pray where?
Street corners.
Out in the open, okay? He actually mentions the synagogue, outside the synagogue, and on the street corners, so that their prayer would be seen by everybody. When you pray, Jesus says to them, go to your back room. And you can see the difference between the public space, the public domain, and the private domain, okay? There's just a little wall separating between the two, but there's a world of difference between these two as well. Finally, one final example. You remember when the disciples asked Jesus different things, the times, etc. He said to them, I'm going to my Father to do what?
Prepare a place.
Prepare a home for you. In my Father's house are many mansions, many rooms. This is what they had in mind, folks. The entire church, the entire community, the entire congregation living in one compound with Jesus in their midst. This is basically the vision of the New Jerusalem. Okay? It's a far cry from individualism. Sorry, Americans. Okay? It is a community. It is the body of Christ with Christ in their midst. So I know that it's hot.
Is this the actual ruin?
This is the actual ruin, yeah.
Wow. Excuse me.
Not a big difference between the sun.
I know. Yeah, like 10 degrees.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, although the location is correct, this building is from a slightly later period. Okay? This synagogue, the building itself, around us, are not from the time of Jesus, but from about 300 years later, the time when the local community, Jewish community, decided to knock down the old synagogue and build a new, finer one in its place. However, if you look down at the lower level here, you'll notice that the foundations of this 4th century synagogue was frozen over earlier. I was going to take some pictures from the 1st century. Okay. So this is the location. This is the site of several miracles of Jesus recorded in the Gospels. One of them was filled with a man, see here, who had an unclean spirit. It says that Jesus came into the synagogue on the day of Sabbath. They brought this man who was there with an unclean spirit. And what did the man, or rather the demon, said to Jesus?
Why?
No?
Why are you
Am I good?
What business do we have with each other? Right? Jesus, the
Thank
Son
you.
of the Most
I
High
appreciate
God.
it.
Right? Yeah? Bear in mind that even before Peter's confession of faith in Caesarea Philippi, it was the demons who recognized Jesus for who he was. This is the best proof as to the identity, the true identity of Jesus. And while all those people were still perplexed as to who Jesus really was, I mean, they could tell there was something very, very different about him. But at that time, flesh and blood, obviously, ordinary people didn't really understand, not even Jesus' inner circle, that Jesus was not just a great man, great rabbi, great prophet. He was, in fact, someone who was sent from the Father. He was the Son of the living God. But the demons had absolutely no questions about that. They knew and identified Jesus immediately for who he was. And by the way, speaking of that incident, that's exactly the same reply that Jesus got from the legion of demons. Remember, he asked, what is your name? He said, Legion, because there were many demons. And that's exactly the same thing they said to him. What business do we have with each other? Why, please don't send us down into the abyss, right? So they knew exactly who they were standing Exactly. So this is it. This is a basilica. Basically, that's the name of the structure, synagogue, from the 4th century AD. You can imagine Jesus teaching here. He was a teacher, rabbi, and during that time period, while the temple was still standing in Jerusalem, the Jewish population didn't really consider their synagogues as temples. Okay, there was only one house of God, and that was in Jerusalem, the temple. But then again, later on, when the Romans destroyed the temple and the Jews could no longer go to worship the house of God, those Jewish synagogues became much more closely associated with the concept of the temple, to the point where even today, if you were to go to Jewish communities many times, they would refer to their synagogues as temples. Okay? So, house of gathering and house of prayer during the time of Jesus. So, if you want, go ahead and take some pictures.